saw it all, the war, the massacre, the fight for freedom. I was more than just a witness. I was part of that nightmare that many try to forget. But today, I am the only one who can tell what really happened. It wasn't just a revolt. It was a secret war, a movement that began in the shadows of the slave quarters and ended in the hands of those who never imagined it would be possible. I remember the fear, the tension in the air, the furtive glances, the whispers, each of us holding a secret that could cost us our lives. But what began in silence turned into a roar of vengeance. The masters never knew what awaited them. If you think hatred isn't capable of creating resistance, stay with me until the end of this story. I was there, I lived it all, and now, the truths they tried to bury, I bring to light. I'll never forget the feeling of the heat in the slave quarters, the heat coming from the exhausted bodies of others like me, the heat from the hot ground that seemed to swallow us whole, and the heat that came from constant fear, as if every breath was being monitored, every glance, every word, every gesture. I remember the nights when we squeezed together, trying to sleep a little, but the night was never quiet, never peaceful. The weight of oppression hung over us like a heavy cloak, and the fear it caused never ended. Every sigh, every movement, was a reminder that if we dared to do something wrong, the punishment would be cruel, merciless. But what I remember most, what marked me indelibly, was the look from the masters. They didn't need to speak. A look was enough. It was a look that said it all. We were nothing. We weren't human. We were property, things to be used and discarded. I saw that in their eyes, and it ate me up inside. They looked at us as if we were mere animals, soulless, worthless, except as tools for labor, for their profit. It was a coldness that froze the spine, that made the soul shrink in pain. I still remember the sound of chains, the sound of keys, clanging on the doors of our cells, and the crack of the whip on the backs of those who dared to be bolder. The sound of a broken soul, a shattered body, lost dignity. This happened every day, and the pain it caused. You have no idea what it feels like in your skin, to feel less than a human being. To know your life is worth no more than the wood they cut, or the land they plow. But at the same time, there was something inside me, a flame that refused to go out. We looked at each other in the darkness of the quarters, and though the words were few, we knew we weren't completely defeated. Not yet. We had been broken, yes, but not destroyed. And it was there, in that place of pain and humiliation, that the first thoughts of resistance began to take root. We spoke softly to each other, with fear in our eyes, but with something else in our hearts, something that couldn't be erased. The idea that one day we would have our freedom, the idea that one day we would be the ones to control our fate, no longer the ones to be controlled. It was a distant dream, but the idea spread like a silent fire. We joined together, one by one, whispering about what could be, about what was to come. But how do you fight something so great? How do you face those who had everything, while we had nothing but our dignity, which still resisted in some way? They had power, wealth, weapons, but we had something they could never understand. We had the desire to be free, something they could not take from us. What we started to build among us wasn't just resistance, it was something deeper, something that grew within each of us. It was the idea that one day we would no longer be their property, that one day the masters wouldn't have control over our lives. I saw fear in many eyes, but I also saw determination in some. We weren't many, not yet, but day by day, as more and more of us began to join, fear began to disappear, and hope, though fragile, began to be born. The sun never seemed to shine in the slave quarters, but there was something stronger than the darkness, an invisible force, a promise that even if we weren't ready now, the right time would come. And maybe you don't understand, but that fight wasn't just against the masters. It wasn't just about freedom. It was about dignity. It was about proving to ourselves that we were more than that, more than what they wanted us to be. It was about leaving a legacy, not of fear and humiliation, but of courage and resistance. We were stronger than they could imagine, and one day, that silent fire that started. What I lived, what I saw, can't be told without the pain of the past choking me. I speak now, older, with tired bones, and a memory still fresh, as if time is incapable of erasing what we were, of erasing what we did. It all started with a whisper, a low murmur, almost imperceptible, that spread through the corners of the slave quarters, through the cracks in the walls and the creaks of the aged wood. Sometimes, it was just a look, and those by my side knew something was about to change. We didn't know exactly what, but we knew we were no longer alone. We were no longer just tired bodies carrying chains and the weight of the land. We began to understand that there was more inside us, something stronger than any whip. Fear still dominated us. There's no denying that. The fear of being seen, of being heard, the fear of the consequences. The Master's vigilance was relentless. Their hands were in every corner, like shadows that followed us. But in that heavy silence, in every exchanged glance, a flame began to burn. Small actions began to happen. A note whispered under a cell door, the sound of a lock being broken at a distance, a word exchanged over tobacco, all in secret, all with a precision only pain could teach us. Sometimes I wondered if what we were planning was real, or if it was just a fantasy generated by our tortured minds, an impossible desire for freedom that became a weight on our hearts. I had doubts like everyone there, but the truth is that small actions began to grow. A broken mirror here, a missing tool there. No one could deny it anymore. Something was happening. The revolt was beginning to be forged between us, in the shadows of the quarters, in the spaces between our looks. But the worst wasn't the fear of being caught. The worst was what would come next. What would happen when we actually made the decision to act? What would happen when our courage, still a timid seed, grew enough to break the silence? I knew the revolt wouldn't be simple. It wouldn't be something that would end in a day. It was a change that would come at the cost of many lives. I knew that, even if we won, the fight would be long. And I wondered if I would be able to see it through to the end. All we wanted was to feel alive again. To feel that we weren't just the reflection of a chain that tied us to the ground, but that we were something more, something that still had power over its destiny, that spread like poison. In every gesture, in every word, we felt the urgency, but also the beauty of revolt. It was as if, even in our worst moments, we were finally reclaiming something of ourselves, something that should never have been taken. And it was on one of those nights, when the air was heavy, almost unbearable, that everything changed. The decision had been made. There was no going back. We knew what we had to do. And when the first scream echoed through the quarters, it wasn't just the sound of a revolt. It was the sound of all the accumulated pain, of all the crushed hopes, of all the stolen lives. It was the sound of our humanity being returned to us, in a way so raw and real that it made me question if we would still be able to be the same. After that, I looked at the faces around me, saw the same uncertainty that was inside me, but I also saw a flame starting to burn with force. It was no longer just about survival, it was about dignity, about showing ourselves to the world for what we were, human beings, no longer invisible, no longer shadows. Every movement we made from then on, every word whispered, every action was an act of resistance, an act of rebuilding ourselves, an act of shouting to the world that we also existed, that we would no longer be erased. I know you, there on the other side, may not understand everything I'm saying, and maybe you don't need to understand everything, but what I do know is that night, the night of the first scream, was the beginning of something that could no longer be controlled. It was like a river beginning to rise, and when it reaches its force, nothing can stop it. It was the beginning of a movement that would spread through every corner, that would make the masters fear what they never imagined, that their slaves, those they saw as nothing, could finally take control. We were the storm that was about to hit, and nothing could stop us. So, if you care about the stories I'm telling, if you believe these words need to be heard, subscribe to the channel. The fight hasn't ended for me, and I need you to be with me. The story of what happened, of what we were and what we are, must stay alive. Not for the memory of the masters, but for the memory of each one of us who resisted. What you do now, by listening to these words, is part of that resistance. So, listen to me and subscribe, because when the story is told, it can never be forgotten. I never imagined that a simple piece of paper could transform my life into a nightmare. The paper was there, hidden, between the corners of a drawer I had never touched before. I knew that the love between us wasn't perfect, but I thought I could trust him. I thought I could trust what we had built together. And then, that day, when I opened the drawer and saw that pregnancy test, something inside me shattered. A piece of my trust broke. A piece of what I thought was my world. I couldn't understand. I couldn't process. The words on the paper were clear, but their meaning was a direct blow to my heart. My body froze for a moment. The air disappeared. from my lungs, and the feeling of being dragged into the reality of a lie I wasn't ready to face suffocated me. How could I not have noticed? How could I have spent so much time without seeing that something was wrong? The man I called my husband, the man I thought I knew so well, now seemed like a complete stranger. It was as if I were looking at him through a dense fog, unable to comprehend how he had come to this point, how he had gotten here. Every smile, every word, every gesture now seemed like a facade. How had he been so astute in hiding this from me, in lying so coldly? Every lie he told seemed to fit perfectly with the pieces of a puzzle I never wanted to put together, and I felt completely alone in the midst of this discovery, as if I were floating, without anchorage, without knowing who to trust, without knowing who to turn to. All that was left was the pain of a truth that was impossible to ignore. I knew I had to talk to him, but fear paralyzed me. Fear of what he would say, fear of the words that might be said but could never be undone, fear of losing everything we had built. What I feared most wasn't the revelation of the betrayal, but the silence that would follow. The silence that would explain everything, or worse, leave me with even more uncertainty, with no answers, no direction. I didn't know how to handle it, and I asked myself, at that moment, if he really cared. I wanted to know if he regretted it, if he felt the pain of seeing me like this, shattered. But his silence was also an answer, wasn't it? He was never good with words, but now, he was more distant than ever. Have you ever found yourself thinking about what you would do if you were in my place? How would you react, knowing you were betrayed in such a cruel way? I feel lost, not knowing which direction to take. If it were you, would you forgive? Would you be able to move on, or would it be impossible to leave so much pain behind? I don't know what's right anymore. I don't know who I can trust. If you have anything to say about this, I would really like to hear. Leave a comment here and share your thoughts. What would you do if you were living my pain? I need to understand. I need to know that I'm not alone in this. The truth is, every thought led me to another, like a maze of emotions that never ended. I wondered what my life would be like from now on. Would it be possible to continue, knowing everything? Would I be able to forgive him one day? I knew my life would never be the same again. It wouldn't be the same as before. Everything had changed in that instant, in that simple piece of paper. I couldn't go back. I couldn't ignore the truth. I couldn't pretend nothing had happened anymore. But what haunted me more was what it meant for my future. What did it mean for me, for our relationship, for our dreams? The answer was there, in the lines between, but I still didn't know how to deal with it. Every word I exchanged with him from now on would be marked by doubt, by fear. He would never be the man I thought he was. And I would never be the same. It cut me, tore me apart. I wanted to believe that things could go back to normal, that we could overcome this, but a part of me knew it wouldn't be easy, that it wouldn't be simple. Trust had been broken, and when that happens, there's no way to just glue the pieces back together. What remains is silence, emptiness, and the painful task of rebuilding something that may never be what it once was. So, if you have any advice, if you've been through something like this, or if you just understand the pain of someone losing trust, share it in the comments. I really want to know what you think about this, because maybe, together, we can find a little answer to the questions that remain unanswered. There's no right or wrong, but I need to understand. I need to know what to do from here. Maybe your story will help me find a path, or maybe just knowing I'm not alone in this whirlwind will be a relief. I thought I knew what to do, that I would have the courage to face what he had done to me, but nothing in my life had prepared me for that moment. I saw him there, in front of me, with tired eyes, with that expression I knew so well, but now seemed empty, strange. He was waiting for me to say something, waiting for me to react, but there were no words I could choose that would be enough. He looked at me, and inside me, a storm of feelings was forming. I didn't want to be there. I didn't want to have to face that reality, that lie he had built. The pain I felt wasn't just from the betrayal, but from the confusion within me. What should I do? Forgive him? Move on as if nothing had happened? Or would it be wiser to go my own way? Despite everything we had built together, I felt torn between anger and sadness, between the desire for freedom and the fear of the unknown. He didn't know what to say. He was never good with words. Now, he was without answers, and so was I. There was a silence between us, a silence so heavy we could barely breathe. I wanted him there, but at the same time, I hated him for putting me in this place. How could he be so insensitive, so selfish. I felt destroyed, as if the ground had vanished beneath my feet. The trust I had in him turned to dust, and what remained was an emptiness. He tried to explain, tried to talk about the circumstances, about what had led him to do what he did. But his words were empty to me. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. I didn't want to hear excuses. I didn't want him to try to justify the unjustifiable. What was left for me now was the choice to move forward with him, to try to rebuild what was broken, or the choice to walk away and go on alone, even though I knew the pain of that would be almost unbearable. That decision was consuming me, swallowing me whole, and I knew that no matter what I chose, the pain would come. I didn't know who to believe anymore. Maybe he regretted it, maybe not. Maybe he loved me, maybe not. All I knew was that, somehow, my soul was broken, and I didn't know if I could rebuild myself. So, in that moment, in the deepest silence, I looked at him one last time and felt a pain that I could never describe in words. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, but the loss of something I didn't know if I could recover. Love, trust, hope. Everything was falling apart in an instant, and I stood there, alone with my thoughts, with my doubts. But somehow, a part of me knew I would have to make a decision. There was no more putting it off. Life doesn't wait, and neither should I wait for something that might never come. He was waiting for my reaction, but what I felt in that moment was a weariness so deep that I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. Maybe what hurt me the most was knowing that I wasn't the same person anymore. Nothing could go back to what it was before. And if you've ever looked at the person you love and wondered if what you had can still be rebuilt, you know what I mean. But have you ever felt so broken, so lost, that you didn't even know where to begin? I know that we all go through moments where the weight of the choices is more than we can carry alone. Maybe you, on the other side, have lived something similar. And if you've gone through this, maybe you know exactly what it's like to live with that doubt, with that emptiness. So, if this story touched you in any way, and you understand the pain of losing something you thought was safe, I ask, from the bottom of my heart, that you leave a like, because, in the end, we're all trying to rebuild what's been broken, no matter how hard the path is. Your like, your presence, means more to me than I can say. It's a small gesture, but it makes all the difference to those who, like me, are trying to understand what to do from here. And I ask you, with all my heart, to help me find a little strength to move forward. If you also felt this pain, let me know. Your empathy may be what helps me carry on. So, leave your like, if you can, and let's carry this burden together, no matter how difficult it may be. After everything we went through, the sleepless nights, the endless conversations, the glances full of guilt, the moment came to make a decision that would change everything. It was no longer about what he or I wanted, but about what I needed to find peace. With each day, the pain of the deceit consumed me more, left me emptier, but, at the same time, the thought of leaving everything behind tormented me. I knew that if I stayed, I would never be the same. What he did wouldn't just be erased. The pain of betrayal would stay with me like a permanent mark. And, if I left, the longing, the emptiness, would be even more intense. Nothing seemed easy. I felt lost, as if I were at a crossroads, not knowing which path to take. I always heard that time heals everything, but over time, I learned that time doesn't heal, it just teaches you how to live with the pain. It taught me to be stronger, to understand that pain doesn't disappear, but we can learn to carry it. Time made me realize that freedom isn't living without pain, but choosing what to do with it. And, perhaps, true freedom was freeing myself from him, freeing myself from what we became, from what he made me believe we were. Perhaps the answer to my pain lay in letting go, not in forgiveness, but in the courage to move on, to rebuild my life, to reconnect with myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I decided that my peace could not depend on him. He begged me to stay, begged me to try, but I knew that for anything to change, I would first need to change. I couldn't keep allowing myself to live a lie. I couldn't keep drowning in a sea of doubts and regrets, not knowing where it would lead me. I needed more than apologies. I needed space to grow, to understand myself again, to heal. And that healing wouldn't come if I stayed there, in that house, with him, not knowing who I was, not knowing what I wanted. So, I made the decision to walk away, to go alone, no matter how difficult it was. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about anger. It was about the need to find my own voice, to listen to myself, to take care of myself. I knew he was suffering too, that he was lost. But the truth is, I couldn't carry the weight of his choices anymore. I had to choose myself. As much as my heart was broken, as much as I knew loneliness would be painful, I knew that this was the only way for me to find myself again. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. But one thing I knew, I wouldn't be a prisoner of pain anymore. I wouldn't let betrayal define me. I refused to live as a shadow of what I could be. And at that moment, I found strength. A strength I didn't know I had, but that emerged when I made the decision to free myself. I freed my soul, my peace, and the hope that, in the end, everything would fall into place. Not the way I expected, not the way I dreamed, but in a way that would allow me to live again. Not as the woman he betrayed, but as the woman who was ready to start over. I separated myself from him not only physically, but emotionally. And it was then, in that instant, that something inside me began to heal. From that moment on, I knew the process would be long, but I was ready to move forward, with or without him. After everything we went through, the sleepless nights, the endless conversations, the glances full of guilt, the moment came to make a decision that would change everything. It was no longer about what he or I wanted, but about what I needed to find peace. With each day, the pain of the deceit consumed me more, left me emptier. But, at the same time, the thought of leaving everything behind tormented me. I knew that if I stayed, I would never be the same. What he did wouldn't just be erased. The pain of betrayal would stay with me like a permanent mark. And, if I left, the longing, the emptiness, would be even more intense. Nothing seemed easy. I felt lost, as if I were at a crossroads, not knowing which path to take. I always heard that time heals everything, but over time, I learned that time doesn't heal, it just teaches you how to live with the pain. It taught me to be stronger, to understand that pain doesn't disappear, but we can learn to carry it. Time made me realize that freedom isn't living without pain, but choosing what to do with it. And, perhaps, true freedom was freeing myself from him, freeing myself from what we became, from what he made me believe we were. Perhaps the answer to my pain lay in letting go, not in forgiveness, but in the courage to move on, to rebuild my life, to reconnect with myself. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I decided that my peace could not depend on him. He begged me to stay, begged me to try, but I knew that for anything to change, I would first need to change. I couldn't keep allowing myself to live a lie. I couldn't keep drowning in a sea of doubts and regrets, not knowing where it would lead me. I needed more than apologies. I needed space to grow, to understand myself again, to heal. And that healing wouldn't come if I stayed there, in that house, with him, not knowing who I was, not knowing what I wanted. So, I made the decision to walk away, to go alone, no matter how difficult it was. It wasn't about revenge, it wasn't about anger. It was about the need to find my own voice, to listen to myself, to take care of myself. I knew he was suffering too, that he was lost. But the truth is, I couldn't carry the weight of his choices anymore. I had to choose myself. As much as my heart was broken, as much as I knew loneliness would be painful, I knew that this was the only way for me to find myself again. I don't know what the future holds for me. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. But one thing I knew, I wouldn't be a prisoner of pain anymore. I wouldn't let betrayal define me. I refused to live as a shadow of what I could be. And, at that moment, I found strength. A strength I didn't know I had, but that emerged when I made the decision to free myself. I freed my soul, my peace, and the hope that, in the end, everything would fall into place. Not the way I expected, not the way I dreamed, but in a way that would allow me to live again. Not as the woman he betrayed, but as the woman who was ready to start over. I separated myself from him not only physically, but emotionally. And it was then, in that instant, that something inside me began to heal. From that moment on, I knew the process would be long, but I was ready to move forward, with or without him. And here I am, standing on the other side of everything that's happened, but still feeling like I'm a stranger to myself. There's this sense of finality, but also a deep, aching emptiness that no one could ever fully understand unless they've walked this road. I never imagined it would be like this, to feel both free and so trapped in the memories at the same time. I thought I could leave it all behind. I thought walking away would fix everything. that the pieces would somehow fall back together. But that's not how life works. You can leave a person, you can walk away from a place, but the emotions, the memories, they follow you like shadows. They stay with you, even when you think you've moved on. And I've learned that moving on doesn't mean forgetting, doesn't mean pretending the past didn't happen. It means accepting that it did, and still choosing to keep going. In the silence of the nights, I still find myself thinking about what could have been, wondering if he ever truly understood the weight of what he did. But I don't ask myself those questions anymore. What matters now is what I do with this second chance I've been given. A chance to rebuild, to heal, to live in a way I never could have imagined while I was still tied to him. I had to cut the ties, even though it hurt, even though it felt like I was losing part of myself. But in truth, I was finding myself. And I think that's what's hardest for anyone who's been through something like this. We give so much of ourselves to someone else, and when they break us, we have to somehow put ourselves back together. It's not easy, it's painful, it's slow, but it's possible. Sometimes, I wonder what it would be like to have someone to lean on, to not feel this weight on my chest, to not be alone with the burden of this heartache. But then I remind myself that I'm not really alone. I have me, I have my strength, my will to survive, to rebuild, and that's what matters now. I've learned that I can't depend on anyone else to heal me. I have to be the one to do that. And, as I move forward, I know it won't always be easy. There will be moments when I'll feel like I'm falling, like I'm losing everything again. But I will get back up. I will keep going, because I am worthy of a life that is whole, a life that is free of the pain I've carried for so long. The truth is, I'm still healing. I don't know when I'll feel completely whole again, but I know that, in time, I will. And in this moment, in this space between what was and what will be, I'm learning to love myself again. I'm learning that it's okay to be broken, and it's okay to take my time putting the pieces back together. And maybe, just maybe, there's someone else out there who understands. Maybe you've been through this too. Maybe you know exactly what it feels like to be torn apart by someone you loved. And if you do, if you've felt this pain and survived it, then we're not so different. And if you're still searching for a way to move on, if you're still trying to find peace in the middle of your own heartache, just know that you're not alone. You are not alone in this. We're all just trying to survive. We're all just trying to make it through. If you've been with me through this, if you've listened to my story and felt something, I want you to know that I hear you too. And I ask, just as a simple, quiet request, that you stay with me. Stay with us. Let's keep going together, even if it's just one step at a time. If this story resonates with you, if you feel like we've shared something in this journey, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe, so we can walk this road together. Let's keep our stories alive. Let's keep learning from each other. I'll be here, and I hope you'll join me for the next part of this journey, where we continue to heal, to grow, to find peace. Stay with us, stay with me, and let's keep going. For now, and for always,